We've had a really good week this week for taking small harvests from the garden and the greenhouses. We had his first ripe cherry tomatoes, and now we've got regular tomatoes well on their way to ripening as well. We're taking lots of beans, cucumbers and strawberries. But at some point of every single week, when the temperatures are what they are now, and we're also getting a bit of rainfall, you've got to keep your eye on these plants, because the weeds are going to get out of control if you don't. The plants in the greenhouse are going to start growing twice as fast. So we need to keep a check on the tomato plants especially, because before you know it, those branches on those plants are going to get so long, they're going to start to drop down. And if they drop down too far and kink, that's going to ruin any fruit that's potentially growing. And apart from that, the wind's back as well. And I've already noticed it's blown over a tomato plant that's in a container. So I've just stood that back up and put it a bit close to the wall to get a bit of shelter. So I've got my string and I've got my scissors, and it's time for a little greenhouse maintenance. And here's a prime example of that. These tomato plants have now shot right up, virtually touching the roof at greenhouse in just a week, and that's because of all that sun that we've had. So these branches need support in there, because obviously as these fruits get bigger, that's going to weight this branch, and it's not really a thick stem to start with. So that's one job we definitely need to do today. And also those French bean plants that we only harvested 2 days ago are now full of beans again. So that's another job. Check those and get all those off. But at the bottom of this plant, that's a sight for sore eyes. As first regular tomato is nearly ripe. And we've got some more on here as well. And this plant. So we're on our way now to getting a little harvest of regular tomatoes. But to ensure that all these others get a chance to actually ripen, we need to look after the plant. So when we tie these plants up, not only do we need to secure them to this cane, but we need to secure the cane to the back of this greenhouse, because eventually the weight's going to get too much and the cane is just going to start falling forward with the old plant tied to it. So first we'll pull in these branches. And this one as well, so we can get it more like that. It's a more compact plant then. Now you can see that looks a lot better, but now we need to stop this, so we'll tie it to the back there as well. So we'll give us just enough string to wrap around that cane. And then we can just pull the whole thing in like that until we've got it back level. And then we'll just tie that off. And just for the sake of a couple of minutes maintenance on these plants, they're not moving at all now. So we haven't got to worry about these branches bending with the weight of the fruit and snapping, or the entire plant falling forward. It can't go anywhere now. So all we need to do is go around and then do the same thing to all these other plants. And if you see this on any of your plants, don't say I'll do it tomorrow, because you won't. And by the time you do get around to doing it, it'll be too late. That's another one done. Now that was a good example of exactly what I'm talking about. Just as I was finishing off, this plant, this one, started to drop. And I just felt it on my back and managed to catch it. So that's about as close as you get to losing a good amount of fruit. Let's get this tied up. Take out suckers while you're doing this as well, because they'll still be growing. Now that one's done as well. And that were a lucky escape. So, just for the sake of 10 minutes, all these plants are now secure. And it's lucky we came in here and checked them when we did, considering what happened with that plant behind us. So we know we've got beans to harvest later on, but let's move on to another greenhouse, see what's happening in there. So in this greenhouse, we've pretty much got the same thing going on. There's cucumbers are quite happily growing up. Those mesh shelvings behind. But the tomato plants are starting to run a bit wild in here also. So, exact same job as before. Check for suckers. Tie them up so they're more compact. And clear any weeds from the bottom. This plant looks a bit unstable. And we haven't got any brackets at the back of this greenhouse to tie this cane to. So I'm just going to pop in another one for extra support. And then we'll just tie them both together. So we've got these done. We know we've got some weeding to do as well. And we've also got a couple of fruits trying to ripen in here as well. So all this maintenance that we do every week is going to ensure that these plants yield as much fruit as possible. So French beans from one still to do, weeding to do in here. Let's move on. Meanwhile, outside, them French beans have bushed out quite a lot in just a couple of days due to that sun and rain. But unfortunately, it looks like these potato plants are today going to be taking the last beating at year, because it looks like they're all done now. A bit of maintenance to do in here, not as bad as the others, but still something we need to keep a check on. Especially when the tomatoes are reaching this stage. That's a beaut. We've got loads of pepper plants here that are in big pots and they're on floor. But I'm going to lift them off at floor now, because they're starting to get some decent fruit on them. And there are certain insects that will just chew holes inside your peppers and basically stay inside there, which at the same time is spoiling your fruit. And that's a really good example of your pepper plant. So we'll get these off at floor today, stand them on a rack or something, away from pests. And we popped one of those chilli plants in a little pot, very small pot, and it's absolutely full of peppers. So even for a small pot, doing really well. But this is where we had a problem this morning. This plant was laid on floor, the wind had completely blown it over. So we've moved that into a bit of a sheltered area. Sweet corn's doing fine. And we can also tie it to those sticks at the back in case it gets too windy. This golden raspberry plant's starting to get some old foliage dying back at the bottom, so we need to get all that cut away as well. It's not going to do the plant any good now. Let's take some of these bottom leaves off. We took that one away, and above it there's a brand new one growing, and this one is the one that's going to get fruit on it. and that looks much better already. But once again, this Jack B. Little miniature pumpkin plant, it's grown even more in just a couple of days. Look how much size it's put on. But more importantly, it looks like we've got a miniature pumpkin growing, so we'll get this tied up for definite. And these pumpkin plants have little tendrils on them, just like cucumbers, so they will grab hold of this trellis on their own now. They just needed guiding to start off with. And we can keep that little pumpkin protected. But now that wind's getting even worse, and it's also starting to rain, so it's back to shelter. So that's only took about half an hour out of your day. But now we know those plants are perfectly secure, and they're going to happily keep growing on and producing more and more fruit for us in return. And don't forget to check, if you've got a planner like I have, the last time that you fed these plants, because you need to be feeding all your plants every 14 days, especially your tomatoes and your peppers, which have now got fruit on them. They need those extra nutrients more than ever now. And if you haven't started a planner, feed them today, make a note of it, and then do it again 14 days later. And although sometimes you may think that this is all a little bit repetitive, showing tying up the tomato plants, clearing the bottoms, taking off the suckers, all those little jobs. But if you follow this channel, and that's what it's all about, because people forget, I forget. As you saw, we had a very lucky escape in that greenhouse. We was just in there at the right moment as that branch decided it was time to just go. And that had a lot of fruit on it. And if it had carried on falling and I hadn't caught it when I did, would have lost all the fruit on that branch. So then it becomes not so repetitive. It's a necessity. It's something you have to do to keep your plants in top condition. Because if you just leave it for a week and say I'll do it next weekend, you're going to have twice the job anyway, so there's no point. You might as well just get on, get it done every week, and set yourself a little schedule. And I would think that Sundays is probably the best time for anybody. So get all your little jobs done Sunday morning, and then you've got all Sunday afternoon to just sit and relax, knowing there's no problems. And all you need is a ball of string, a pair of scissors, and an hour of your time. And if you're interested in seeing other things that we do as these plants start to mature, then just hit that subscribe button, press that notifications bell, and we'll see you on the next update. You all take care.